welcome to our new series. In this series, what we'll be doing is releasing a video every week with tips and tricks on driving, as well as car preparation, maintenance, four-wheel driving, all sorts of tips from the motor industry and from driving. My name's Dylan, I run Skid Control. We're a driver training company and we train a wide variety of drivers in various types of driving, including motorsport, daily driving on the road, low risk driver training, defensive driver training, and everything to do with driving a car. In today's episode, what we are going to be talking about is steering. When you got your license, you were taught to drive the car at 10 and 2. 10 and 2 was taught without power steering to give you a bit of pull on the steering, so that it was a bit easier to steer. But now that we have power steering, there is absolutely no benefit to holding the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The other problem with holding the steering wheel at 10 and 2 is in the middle of the steering wheel, we've got our airbag. If the airbag goes off with your hands at 10 and 2, another steering method that doesn't work or is a very bad habit to have is steering with one hand on the top of the steering wheel. The problem with steering with one hand on the top of the steering wheel is just like 10 and 2, you overdo your inputs for a vehicle with power steering. Same story with the airbag. The only difference is now your arm's directly in front of the airbag, and if that airbag goes off, your arm's going to hit your head. Trust me, you don't want that to happen. An airbag comes out at over 200 to 300 kilometers an hour, and anything in its way is going to get hurt. It is only designed as a supplementary restraint system for your head. So where do we hold the steering wheel then? Very simple, 9 and 3. There's position over there for your thumbs to go inside the steering wheel, and yes, your thumbs go inside the steering wheel. Your hands rest on the steering wheel, and that way you're not hanging onto the steering wheel. Perfect position for it to be at the same level as your heart. So over long periods of time of driving, your fatigue is reduced. At 9 and 3 on the steering wheel, the other thing that you get is a lot more feedback from the vehicle. You can feel what's happening in the front wheels, which is extremely important when driving, and your inputs are only just as much as you need at all times, and you're not overdoing the input. That all of your steering wheel controls, your indicators, your wiper stalks, and your steering wheel controls are all positioned at 9 and 3. Vehicles are ergonomically designed for you to drive with your hands at 9 and 3 on the steering wheel. When you're holding at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, your steering range is fairly limited when it comes to any sort of enthusiastic or sports driving. But if you're holding at 9 and 3, what you'll see is you've got much more turns out of the steering wheel before you need to lift your hands and move along the steering wheel. I'm on my way down to Lakeside, and we're going to jump into our race car, and we're going to show you the advantage about driving at 9 and 3 whilst on the racetrack as well. So here it is. Now what about turning the steering wheel? Well, I can tell you right now a couple of things that you shouldn't do. Hooking the inside of the steering wheel like that, if you look at where my arm is now compared to the airbag, that obviously isn't going to work very well. The other problem with hooking the steering wheel is you don't actually have a lot of control. You overdo the inputs of the steering. This wax on wax off steering method as well, it works when you want to turn quickly, but it doesn't have a lot of control over the steering wheel. If for some reason your steering wheel hits some sort of a bump in the road, holding the steering wheel like that, the steering wheel will slip past your hands and you're not in control of the vehicle. When you're at low speeds, hand over hand steering is nice and fast, nice and easy. But when you're driving at any speeds over 19 k's an hour, when the airbag is active, you want to employ a steering method called the pull-push steering method. Now don't confuse that with shuffling the steering wheel up and down. The pull-push steering method is when your hands are mirroring each other, but they use the full rim of the steering wheel. When you want to turn right, you'll go to the top of the steering wheel with your right hand, pull the steering down, mirror it with your left, swap at the bottom if you need to give more steering, and then push up with your other hand. Same with going the opposite direction. Left hand to the top of the steering wheel, pull it down, mirror your hands to the bottom of the steering wheel, swap it over, and then push the steering wheel up to the top. When practiced, and it doesn't take long to get it right, when practiced, that steering method actually ends up being a very fast steering method. But what happens when we're obviously on the racetrack or when we're doing any sort of mountain roads and we need to control the steering wheel more than avoid the airbag? That's when you're holding at 9 and 3 and your hands never leave that position. Holding at 9 and 3 gives you a lot of turn on the steering wheel, in fact more than any other steering position. When you've got any sort of long driving, it is pretty uncomfortable to be driving at 9 and 3 for a long time. So a recommended steering method for that is down at 8 and 4. 8 and 4 means your hands are even lower down, so your inputs are still nice and low. Your steering range is limited, but it is only designed for driving on long periods of time when conditions are ideal. With your hands down here, they're nice and rested, and you can still feel what's going on with the front wheels of the vehicle. An alternative steering method for long periods of driving is having one hand on the steering wheel, but making sure that that hand that is on the steering wheel is rested against something. If your hand is hanging like that and you hit a bump, it'll make your steering move around a lot, which is less than ideal. So what you need to do is rest it up, and as you can see, I've got it rested on the armrest in this case. Alternatively, if you've got a center armrest and your arm can reach, you can rest it over there. One hand on the steering, the other hand as close as possible. That way in an emergency or when I need to make any sort of maneuvers, I can quickly go up to the steering and I've got my hands back at 9 and 3, which is the ideal steering method. Well, I hope you found that information useful to you, and I hope that you go out and you practice those steering methods when you're out on the road and when you're out on the racetrack. Make sure you give it a crack. We all know we get lazy when it comes to driving, especially when we're on the road. If you have any comments or anything that you'd like to add to this video, make sure you comment below. If you want us to cover anything particularly on the series, leave some suggestions. If you've got any questions, if you've got anything, make sure you send us a message or leave a comment on the video. Make sure you subscribe as well to the YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that bell button as well so that you actually get the notification to let you know that a new video has been released. Until next time, enjoy the drive.